So if you're a veterinary practice owner, how do you choose a veterinary broker? It's probably one of the most important decisions, quite honestly, of your life because it is going to dictate the total value that you get back from your practice. So I'll walk through this playbook. I think this is everything that you need, and you'll be able to make a really informed decision. So I'm Dr. Michael, founder of Transitions Elite. We help veterinary practice owners to sell their practice for the highest price and best deal terms. We actually guarantee it. And we have sold over $250 million worth of veterinary practices, and all those funds are right in your account as an owner. But more importantly, you get the best deal terms. And we have a very specific process, which I'll share throughout this video. Cool. All right. So what does a broker really do? What are the core responsibilities? So number one is you get a practice valuation, or at least a value estimate to understand, okay, is it time to sell? And if it is, what's the approximate sale process or sale amount? They manage the entire process. And this is what distinguishes a really great broker from a poor one. A poor broker is like a real estate agent. They take a property, they list it, and then they wait for the buyers to come in. When a buyer signs, then they're kind of gone, and they rely on the attorney and the accountant to manage the deal. That's exactly what you don't want, because your accountant and attorney are great, but they are not deal makers. And so if you rely on them to be able to manage the deal, it's going to take a lot longer and put a lot more risk into this transaction, and I can guarantee you will not get the most. A recent story, a veterinarian was buying another practice, and the broker listed it. They signed the LOI, and then the broker did nothing. And the owner was so disorganized, and his attorney was managing the transaction, that it took so much longer. And the buyer, this other veterinarian, was so frustrated that he paid $40,000 in legal fees just to get the deal done and to push it to conclusion. And it took over 6 months to be able to close that transaction. And so really annoying for the buyer, and it left a lot on the table for the seller. And so you do not want a real estate agent mindset broker. You want a Wall Street level M&A representative that's going to be really representing your practice. So once this process is set up and you know what it is, and I have another video that really goes through in detail that process, really it's about creating demand. And this is what's very difficult to do on your own. There's two very difficult things to do on your own. One is to get organized, to be quite honest. And part of that organization is creating an adjusted EBITDA profitability calculation that increases your valuation a lot, basically adding in a lot of expenses that you've taken out of the practice, which boosts the profitability. But the second thing is to generate demand. And this is by going out to the best buyers and engaging them. And as we talk about this, there's going to be two very different strategies to be able to sell a practice. If your practice is over 2 million of revenue and 3+ doctors, then you are selling very likely to a financial buyer. They're the best ones, not the corporate, but the financial buyers. And why I hesitate on corporate is corporate practice owners don't like to sell to corporate. They change the name, the logo, the medical protocols, and it's usually not a cultural fit. But the financial buyers are great. Why? Because they have the highest valuations. They don't mess with the medical protocols, and they really preserve the legacy of the practice. And very often, almost every time, they'll increase the salaries of the staff, produce better benefits and better training opportunities. Plus, your staff can actually navigate in their organization and have professional development, which they don't have within you as a single practice owner. So that's the strategy for $2 million plus. Now, if you're under that amount, then really your buyer are other DVMs. And so that's a very different strategy. That is a strategy where it gets listed on the website. But if it stops there, your practice could be sitting there for years. Instead, it's about demand generation. I'll go into that in a moment. So connecting sellers with qualified buyers, navigating the legal and financial complexities, which is very important, ensuring regulatory compliance of the entire transaction. And then what's critical is negotiating on your behalf and really driving what that valuation is going to be. So what's the first starting part? Well, we need to, as a broker, understand what the equipment is, the goodwill, anything specifically about your practice that is unique, the trends, but again, we all know these things. What kind of staff transition there is, because if you have team members that are going to be leaving before this transaction completes, well, that's going to be a very important and critical negotiation and strategic item for us to be able to work through. And then how and when to tell the staff, and how and when to tell the clients, and what that exactly is going to look like. What are your preferences in general, and then what's the playbooks in terms of how to do it. And the other advantages of working with a broker is you'll get a really good sense of the market value. And a great broker will tell you, don't talk to me until you fix these few things, because if you try to sell now, you're going to lose a lot. So a good broker is not going to be pushing you to sell unless you are ready. And I wouldn't even say psychologically, your practice is ready to sell. Then it probably right now, say right now, is the best time to sell. So I will speak with owners and I will challenge them, because in their mind, they'll say, well, I would like to at least, work for another 5 or 8 years. And then even if I'm young, I'm in my mid 40s, then I'd like to kind of get out of ownership. And my challenge to them is yes, but if you work for the next 10 years as an owner and made $0, would you be happy with that? And of course, everybody, their face scrunches up. What do you mean? I said, well, the valuations now are in a bubble. We are in an absolute peak, and that will be gone. Private equity financial buyers, they roll into an industry and they roll out. When they roll out, there's less competition for your practice, less bidding, and the valuations go back to their previous levels. What are those levels? Traditionally, a practice would sell between 3 to 5 times profit. Now that rate is between 7 to 15 times. We just signed a practice for 14.8x multiple. Totally incredible. So if you're successful and you sacrifice and you work so hard and you take the stress and you don't see your family for the next 10 years and you double the size of your practice, but the valuations are less than half of what they are today, you've actually been paid $0. If you'd sell today, invest the money, and just focus on being a veterinarian, you'd actually have the same net worth as if you struggled for the next 10 years. So I'm very happy to challenge if your practice is ready to have that type of buyer. But if it's not ready and you want that type of buyer, then it's up to me and our team to say, you know what, do not sell now. Fix these few things, get an extra veterinarian, add an extra exam room, and then you're going to be able to command top dollar and, more importantly, the best deal terms. Because the deal terms are, just to be specific, it's how much is in cash, how long are you staying after the sale of the practice, what do your responsibilities look like, and this can range, for example, from a 2-year employment to a 4-year employment. This can range to 100% in cash to 30% in cash. And so all these are going to be driven by the desirability of your practice. Yes, so in terms of the operational side, great brokers will know all the qualified buyers. They'll have the connections with veterinarians if it's a local sale to a local DVM, and or the vendors in the area, or the buying groups. This really shouldn't be corporate. This should be financial buyers. So they are technically corporations, but we wouldn't recommend selling to the traditional corporate groups. And confidentiality is extremely important. And so every step of this way, you don't have to worry about confidentiality, because a broker really knows how to keep that sacred, because it can really throw off a deal, and they know that. And so, for example, we are hypersensitive about confidentiality. And finally, a great broker will not only get you organized, but will organize you for the type of buyer that you're looking for. So if you're above that $2 million mark, really the financial buyers need certain things and look through certain lens, and we prepare your practice through that lens, streamline everything, and then create a very time block plan so that when the buyer comes in, it's not just willy-nilly, oh, let's take an offer here, take an offer there, fly everyone to the same hotel, same hotel bar, they see each other, they have 3 days to put in their best offer, 3 days to negotiate back and forth based on the offers, and this forces everybody to play ball. And guess what? For example, we have trained the buyers to know when we bring a practice to market, it is the best practice. It is a highly desirable practice, and they know they're going to have their skates on, because once we do it, they're only going to have a 6-day window to come with their best offer. So they can't fool around lowballing. They know there's going to be other big players at the table, and they need to come in with their best, and that's what drives the valuation. Of course, you definitely want to have an industry specific. If you go with a broker that's not veterinary related, it's going to be a real disaster for you. So they have to learn the industry. They don't know the buyers. They don't know how to find the buyers. I mean, it's definitely a big mistake. Of course, track record is extremely important. And you want to know, is your seller, is your broker, do they specialize in large practices or do they specialize in small practices? As I've said, two very different deal-making processes. And then what types of network strength, do they know all the buyers? For example, a small broker will not know the big guys or have the accountability with the big guys to be able to drive the highest valuations. And here's an example. So on our team, we have Wall Street, previous experience individuals. And what happens with buyers, especially the sophisticated ones, is through the deal process, they will be looking for negatives in the practice. And at the very end, they will go to drop the price. Here's an example. A practice had a $12 million all cash offer, and it was 3 days before closing. 3 days. The staff knew they were selling. The DVMs knew they were selling. This had been 90 days of rigorous due diligence because we like to go very fast through this process. And the buyer calls and he says, calls Tom on our team and says, Tom, we can't do the 12 million. And Tom said, what do you mean? He said, well, you had a vet, but the vet is now going on leave and that changes the whole dynamic. So what did Tom say? Tom said, firstly, this is why this practice is worth 12 million. Secondly, I can tell you the seller is not going to accept a penny less. Third, that if you do this in this transaction with this seller, practice owner, and we have 5 other practices that are in the process of selling that you're bidding on, we're going to tell the other owners that this is how you honor your word and this is how you play. And so if you submit an offer, that it's not actually a trustworthy offer. So I suggest you call your board and give me a call back. So we said, okay. Calls the board, calls back, okay, we'll do the 12 million. Now I spoke with the practice owner a little bit later. They'd become good friends. And I said, at that point, I bet they would have dropped it from 12 million to 9 million. Would you have accepted that price? And they said, we were so exhausted. Yes, we would have probably accepted that price. And so what you can see is that this is a game that a sophisticated buyer will play with an unsophisticated seller to be able to drop the price dramatically right when you're kind of at your most vulnerable. But by having a really great broker that has the relationships and multiple deals going on with these buyers at the same time, we can drive the accountability that they honor their word and they do the right thing, and we get that full valuation of what it was signed on in the offer. So it's very, very important. Next, yes. So basically, we have to prepare all the financial statements, equipment, inventory, staff, client database, and all the practice metrics. It's quite overwhelming, to be quite honest, to do on your own. Set the expectations. This is where we time box everything. And we do not go to market until we're super organized to be able to have everything ready and then go fast once we engage the buyers. Then a great broker will create a data room that puts all the data that's confidential in that data room, has all the potential buyers sign an NDA, and then really works through that negotiation process, bidding each buyer against each other, taking the best deal terms from one, the best offer in terms of cash of another, and then basically telling them, hey, if you want this practice, this other buyer is offering 12 million and a 2-year earnout, and you're offering 13 million, but a 4-year earnout. If you can do 2 years as an earnout or an employment, then you got it. And this is how we get the best deal terms and the best price. Finally, one of the most important things, and one of the things that keeps practice owners up at night, is how to communicate this to your team. And this is critical. If the ball is fumbled here, it can throw everything into a complete and utter disaster state. So in essence, when you're going through this process, the only person that should be aware and bound by confidentiality, besides the buyers, and they're very good at confidentiality, besides your broker and professional team, is going to be your practice manager, because they need to help you get the documentation. The rest of the team is usually shared with this information about 2 weeks before the end. This can be more complicated if it comes down to contracts. If you don't have contracts with your team, then you're going to have to address this earlier on, but still it's towards the end of the transaction. In all of our time and all the practices that we've sold, again, $250 million worth, we have never had a veterinarian walk out before the end of the sale. Why? Because the buyers are very invested in keeping your veterinarians there, and they put together packages that make their head spin in terms of being attractive compared to what they have currently with you. And they realize that this is definitely somewhere they want to stay at least for a few years, and they commit to that. So all this happens in the last 2 weeks of sale, and it has never killed a deal that we've been working on, killed a practice transaction. So it's a very nuanced but important thing to do, and your broker needs to be very good at communicating this final component. And with the clients, basically, they don't even have to be aware of it. They'll slowly come to be aware over time, and that's completely fine. And then for about a 3-month period, there's a transition phase where money starts going into their account. You're still paying bills, but that's completely fine, because then there's a true-up period, and then everybody gets paid what they should be paid. But the key is that the wire of the funds happen on day 0 of the new owner. So there's no delays in that all the funds get wired at the same time and go into your account. And by the way, I'll do this in another video. It typically doesn't go into your personal account for tax purposes. That's also what we're able to advise on, is how can you minimize your tax burden with this substantial transaction. So if you're watching this video and you're an owner, what should you do? Well, the first thing is to get a practice value estimate. This is what I really like. I don't like the bloated valuation documents that are 40 pages and basically you know everything that's in those pages except the number, and the number comes from the expertise that the broker has. They can look at your practice in an instance like you look at an animal. You can basically know what are the dynamics of that. So in the description below is a link to a free practice value estimate. And in this estimate, you're going to get three things. You're going to understand what is the approximate value of your practice. What do we think you would get? Number two, you're going to get, should you sell now or should you wait? Very important consideration for you as an owner. And even if you're just thinking about it in the next 5 years, you need to understand the answer to that question. And then number three, you're going to be able to get the 5 most critical profit drivers for your practice and how to really enhance the profitability. This is particularly important if you're not interested in selling right away, because then you'll be able to boost the profitability. And then when you speak with us next, your practice is going to be even more valuable. So click the link in the description, grab one of those time slots, and you'll speak with either myself or one of my senior members of our team, and we'll make sure that we get you the answers and really the mindset and knowledge you need to get the best deal and best deal terms for your practice. And finally, we have a number of resources for you as well in terms of great questions to ask a broker, a documentation checklist before going to sell, approximate timeline that would be great for you to be able to sell, and then how to communicate with the staff. If you would like that, just go to our website, transitionselite.com. You can just enter in the contact form and request it, and we'll be able to send that to you. So what's very important and kind of final considerations for you is to maintain confidentiality through the whole process. Focus on both the price and the terms. It's not just the price. Consider the impact on the staff and the clients. So you want to go with a buyer that you really like and trust, and that's part of the art on the veterinary broker's side. Really, what we also work with owners is to force them to think through what their life is after selling. And it's not being a veterinarian. So your identity is not sold out. In fact, you are a veterinarian even more so, because you get to just focus on your medical side. And the buyers that we would recommend selling to, they don't mess with the medicine. So you're still fully in charge on the medical side. All of the sellers, the practice owners that we have sold, they all say they really enjoy their post-sale life and they would never go back and undo that sale. So very important. And then, of course, understanding the tax implications. So click the link below, get your free practice value estimate, get the information that you need. And if you enjoyed the video, if you wouldn't mind clicking the like button or subscribe, really help the channel. I'm new to this. I'm trying to make it work. And also, not new to selling practices, but new to YouTube. And then it will also come up in your YouTube feed, because for you as a practice owner, I have a lot of good things that I'm working on, and I can't wait to share with you. So awesome. See you there.